right, let's get started because the caterer is showing up, beer and wine is appearing in the kitchen, and we still have a couple presentations to get through, so we don't want to suffer too much when there's libations at the end of the tunnel. All right, so the next couple presentations are going to start getting a little more technical, and there's a reason for all this. We got to get everybody up to speed on actually how you set up these trials and accounts and whatnot. But we're going to let Ben kick it off with how to do a demo on the API, and then you can all go home and create your own magical demos and wow your customers, right, Ben?
That's right.
All right.
One, two. Nope. Hey, here we go. Apparently I check. Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Is it too loud? Too loud? Man, you guys need to make up your mind. I might be too loud. It's all the auction experience. Is that better? I grew up in an auction family, so I might talk fast. My apologies in advance to the Israelis. What's that? Yeah, I grew up in the auction business in Moses Lake. Yes. Yeah. 1 now, 1 1/4, 1 1/2, 75, 2 now, 2 1/4, 2 1/2, 75. That kind of stuff. Anyway, hey, how do you... So my job is to demonstrate the API. How do you, I had a buddy come to me, Casey came to me and said, so how do you demo a concept? And, because the API is kind of ethereal. You do it with lots of pictures and metaphors. And that's what we're going to try to do today. This is a high level, quick and dirty. I have 60 minutes of material to cram into 30 minutes. So there's no way I can do it. So I'm skipping tons of stuff. And this is a shameless plug now for drill down on the next API University called Dance with the API Demo Tools. And so we're going to get into some real meat, do a lot more deeper stuff, help build your confidence with presenting the API. So please, on that note, lots of material. Please hold your questions to the end. Please hold your questions to the end. Especially Dan and Roy, please hold your questions and comments to the end. No, seriously, if you're completely lost, raise your hand. But otherwise, I'm just going to move through it, write your questions down. We'll cover them at the end. I'm a newbie to the CSM team. I think, honestly, Roy had me do this because he thought I would learn how to present the demo if I taught it. There's truth to that. Studies show you should never begin a presentation with a definition. Sorry, I forgot this. We're going to cover mindset, how to make a good API demo, a use case with a fictitious company called Acme Connections, Inc., and then what to do now, where to go from here. Studies show you should never begin a presentation with the definition. I would like to begin my presentation with a definition of what the API is, and then talk about a couple of metaphors to help you kind of visualize and therefore communicate what the API is to your customers. The first question is the definition. API, what is it? API stands for Application Programming Interface. If you don't know what an API is, that definition isn't really very helpful. I suggest you maybe shouldn't actually ever use that. If you're a coder and you actually know what an API is already, so then that definition is useful. But it's technically accurate, but it's not very helpful. It's kind of good for you to know. But this diagram is actually very good. The API sits in the middle here of all these disparate technologies. You have a car, an intelligent car. You have web apps, enterprise applications, mobile devices, sensors, wearable devices, and the API governs communication between all of them. So essentially, an API is a code library or a library of code that governs communication. It can even talk to other APIs. So you can code an API to say, hey, I want to talk to your API. And you have different interfaces that make this happen. That's what an API is. It's a library of code that governs communication. We can often think of an API as a bridge. A bridge. An API is a bridge between our people search data in our people search index, which is our data, and the customer software. Notice every bridge is unique. Ever notice that? Every bridge is unique. It's unique to the terrain. It's designed and implemented on load requirements, use case requirements. Are the two sides different or the same? What's the climate? In San Francisco, they never get done painting that bridge because in the salt air, they have to just keep priming it to keep it from rusting. And this is essentially why we're not selling a widget with the API. We're selling data as a service. It's not simple. It's not a widget. It's data as a service. There's a lot of moving dynamics, okay? So in the same way of a bridge, the API spans the gap between two digital territories. We have our system, our database, and we're spanning to a customer, which allows custom integration, use case specific integration. It allows data automation and automated decision making. We're talking code to code, all right? Code to code. All API, we talk about code to code in IDV. All API communication is code to code. The difference is when it presents on the other side, is it presenting in a GUI or is it presenting to a rules engine, right? In a rules engine, it's IDV, correct? Correct. Okay, thank you. So it's code to code. And so when customers approach our bridge, this is very important. We've already done half the work. We've kind of built the bridge out into the chasm and said, hey, here's a code library. Here are your tools. Here's a bunch of reference tools. You build to us. We've done half the work already. So that's kind of the API metaphor. And then once the bridge is complete, we serve in a customer support role and serve the data as a service. Again, this is data as a service. It is not a widget. Roy said, the most important thing you can convey in your presentation is, and I think this is so important to him, my salary next year might be tied to this, so I'm going to say it. The most important thing is API sales is like selling in a car lot. Get the customer to experience the car or truck. You know, and Garth actually does this very well. He's like, I want to get our users, he uses a phrase that I won't repeat, but he goes, I want to get our users intimately involved in our data. It's the same thing. And I would kind of add here, what we're trying to do is get the customer on a 1 to 9 month test drive, right? That's what we're trying to do. Now, have you guys ever met those car salesmen or women who their extent of getting you experience in the car and truck is to say, hey, isn't this cool? Here's how you turn on the radio. And that's like the extent of their technical knowledge. We at Customer Success would appreciate it if you guys would become better than turn on the radio car sales people, because we need you to become those gearhead type car salespeople that like know the spark plug size and have the history of the transmission and what the size of the tires are and how many ply they are and like how fast it gets to 0 to 60 in 4 seconds, that kind of thing. The more you can become technically astute, there's been a movement with some of the sales folks here that there's a movement to say, hey, I want to go learn machine learning. I'm going to go take a rudimentary coding class because it helps you become confident in your terms and sell the API. All right, we just covered mindset, definition, and 2 metaphors. Next section, how. You're going to do recon, build your plan, execute the plan. Folks here have talked a ton about doing a recon and preparing for it, but I just want to say, why do recon? An API is very important because the API is not simple. We say on the website that integration is simple. The API is not simple. It's not simple. Have you seen the JSON response that comes back from Garth Moulton's profile? I'm a data guy, and it's overwhelming. I have researched hundreds of use case examples of JSON responses. I have yet to see one that matches our complexity. Okay? That's what we're selling. All right? That's what we're selling. So it's multifaceted, and this is a good thing. And we got on a call last week with Crutchfield. Remember this? We got on the phone call. We're selling this multifaceted, not simple product. It's simple-ish to integrate. But we got on the call, and this woman is very straightforward, nuts and bolts, non-creative and non-technical. She wanted to know at the end of a 20-minute phone call whether or not we could give her a score and a decision on whether or not her orders were legitimate. And she could not wrap her brain around what we were doing. Had we had a little recon on that call, we could have prepared very differently for that call. There are 3 risks when we communicate with the API. Number one is that we feed with a fire hose because there's so much to share. Another one was that we are so obscure because we back off that we get lost in obscurity. And the other one was that we limit what we say, but we tell the wrong story. It's not applicable to our particular customer, right? So we want to do our recon so we can avoid that. Now, this is a fun Acme Connections Incorporated recon. See our lovely Wile E. Coyote? Wile E. Coyote found a bucket of gold in the desert, and he went and decided to create a data startup. And he's going to provide professional social networking services to fellow coyotes so they can up their game on finding roadrunners. So in this scenario, they want to do customer enrichment on their coyote customers. Now, since coyotes want to be elusive, they don't capture a real name or screen name. They only capture an email and a phone number because, all coyotes have a little pocket for their cell phone. And their town, city, and state. And what they want to get from us is a coyote name, a full address, social handles, and gender. Now we know what we're dealing with. We can prep our call accordingly. Now, you're not going to always know all these things in advance, right? But this is the goal. You may know 20% of this, 50% of this, and you go into discovery and you try to tease it out. But you can make a far better demo if you know what is going on here. Who's the staff? Well, let's face it. Wile E. Coyote is creative, nuts and bolts kind of guy. He's an opportunist. But let's face it, not the smartest tool in the shed, right? Might want to keep your language more to 30,000 foot level with Wile E. But he has a chief engineer named Rasheed Wallace. He favors C#. He favors C# as a 3-person dev team in the Arizona high desert. Okay, right? 2 different personalities. I'll leave his code for you. Ever made a strawberry shortcake or an angel food cake and made a mistake? It's a mess of eggs. Assumption is the mother of all mess ups, so you might want to ask questions. All right, build your plan. We want to choose tools and features based on our audience. Now, Roy talks about this a lot. 30,000 feet, 15,000 feet, 5,000 feet. Vary your level based on where you are in the presentation and who you're talking to. And if you go to the website, and we're going to do that now, Joe said demoing live is not advisable. Well, this is what my presentation is, so here we go. If we look at this tool here, this page is largely a 30,000 foot coverage, right? This page here, beginning with how to get started, taking your first steps, this is largely a 15,000 foot, maybe edging into 5,000 foot in places. And then the reference is a 5,000 foot level. If you're covering with Wile E. Coyote, you're probably going to mention, hey, this is where your developer is going to go. Unless they have a use case specific need to cover match criteria or a full person response. If they're wanting to submit 5 phone numbers, for example, you can't do that through a normal query. You have to use a full person search response or a search request. You might then just allude to that, but save that conversation for your developers, right? The API, the cheat sheet. This is a tool we send to people. This is something we largely will cover with developers or technical managers, okay? The demo page, we'll cover this. This spans both all the way from 5,000 feet to 30,000 feet. This is a useful tool, and I'll demo this in a minute. But I just wanted to show you just kind of how this, from the start, we pick our elevation and we go from there based on who we are talking to. Just did that. 30,000 feet. So here are features that are 30,000 feet that are worth promoting. And this is something that we try to cover even as CS people when we're doing demos. It's a custom bridge, number 1. Number 2, it's a RESTful JSON response. That is important because it gives you the ability to call it from just about any piece of software that can compile a JSON response. Mac, Linux, Windows, servers, doesn't matter. And if you can send a JSON response across an HTTPS connection, you can send it from. That means just about every device in the world can do that anymore. That's why the JSON response is important. It's not Windows dependent. It's not Linux dependent. We have documentation and reference guides. We have a history audit trail of people. Like MySpace is no longer around, right? But we still have data from them. I got ahead of myself. Data collection, paper match model. You only pay for what you get. So these are things that that obviously we cover in that 30,000 foot level, 99% uptime. And that a lot of this is on that page I just showed you when you're doing your demo. Now, here's the thing. Not all of this is on that page. So maybe marketing, are there any of them left here? Maybe marketing wants to put these features in some sort of demo so that we have like a 4 to 7 slide deck that we can start our presentations on that we kind of use as a base. I think that would be really advisable. Next, we have the 15,000 foot. We have the Clark Kent demo profile that is free to use and you can code and test against it. We have the code libraries, the snippets. We have something called inferred data. I'll get into more of this later. Data types, sources, thumbnails. These are all like 15K features that are worth covering to certain audiences. May not matter with some. 5K, 5,000 foot features. Person object, possible person objects. Okay, you might allude to the fact you get a possible person, but you're not going to get in the nuts and bolts of a possible person with an executive, right? Search pointer. We now call that a bookmark to the profile. That's now official. Matt has approved it. Okay, it's a bookmark to the approval. Maybe hopefully he'll approve the bridge analogy because that's I've said it. It's out now. It's a bookmark to a profile. Match requirements. People can make very specific match requirements and criteria in their data searches. Data is ordered by recency, right? We show the user when we found the data, which is roughly how old it is, and then when we last saw it, which is roughly how recent it is, the recency. We do this with emails, phones, addresses, metadata. Metadata is defined as data about data, right? All right, it's data about data. All the sources later is metadata. All the recency dates is metadata. We have tons of it, absolutely tons of it. That sets us apart from other people. We have data counts, sources. We can show the sources, timestamps, and then the JSON response. But obviously, you're going to want to use the demo tool to illustrate that. I built this slide, and this slide basically covers our API structure. So what happens is people use code libraries. They make a request across the internet to the API, which is our bridge, to the people search engine. Okay? Once it evaluates it and sends it back as a response, a JSON response, either a full person or possible persons, to the code library, and then they can interpret. And what's kind of interesting here is that they can use our code libraries. We have 5 of them, right? C#, PHP, Ruby, Java, and Python. Okay, we have 5 code libraries. Fortran is not there, I'm sorry. We're gonna roll that out in 2025. By that time, all the Fortran programmers will be in retirement. And then, or you can code your own. If you wanna go use Fortran and you can code an HTTPS RESTful call, a post, and a response, you can code your own, all right? So if you have someone who's an API expert and they wanna just work in the library they've already built a bunch of functions in, they're welcome to do that. Flexible is the point of this. We have these tools. So this is a slide I'm welcome to share. It's going to be in the resource pack at the end. I built this slide as well. Not saying it's marketing approved, but hey, it works. We get back 3 types of responses. You send in search criteria with a query parameter search or a JSON person search. Those are our 2 types of searches. And we respond with either a full person, possible persons array, or a no match. 3 types. It's difficult to get into the demo response without knowing what these are. Might want to put this in a slide deck if you want to use it as a reference. Airplanes fly at different levels. Have fun, but try not to crash and burn. Anyone know what plane that is, by the way? All these planes have been the same one. U-2, that's correct. It's the spy plane that got shot down way back in the 60s. That is correct. But all those pictures were live, were real, though. Those were all the U-2, and they were flying, because you got to land at some point. All right. Do your recon. Pick your tools. Set up your tools. Okay? Set up your tools. Begin by choosing your test queries. Now, anyone remember what it is that Acme Connections gathered? Email and phone number and city, state, county. I'm going to argue that city and state and county are not very useful in this scenario because they have no house number. And these are highly identifying information, so we would start with searching by these. So I'm setting aside, this is what I'm going to query with. Now, hey, I'm using the stock Garth Moulton and Donald Hoddig emails. If you want to come up with your own, I welcome it, but just know that you want a variety. Possible person, full person, possible persons, you want a mixture. We need to come up with something who's a no match. Is it? There we go. 123example.com. We have these tools, which are the ones I just showed you. The API main site, the getting started page, the reference, API cheat sheet. You probably will only reference this if you have a developer on the call. And if you have a developer on the call, we should be on the call. But it happens out of surprises sometimes. And then the demo tool itself. Now, what I do is, I'm going to show these tips real quick. You want to make sure you're logged in. The reason is so that you have your keys and you're getting a full search experience. If you want to show a non-logged in experience, just open a separate browser that's not logged in or go into private mode. You know private browsing mode, you hit Control-Shift-In. then you'll be as if you're not logged in. Practice your showing only one window, and I'm going to show you this in a second. Well, that's what I did here, right? When you do, you guys all know in the Google meetings, you say, hey, only do one window. That way you're ruling out everything else. And then what I do is, and I'm going to show you this right now. We've already talked about closing WhatsApp. I have right here stored a API demo folder, which has my 2 presentation things and then all the same things I just showed you, plus the sales kickoff folder, which I will remove after the sales kickoff. But then what I can do in Chrome is right click on it and say open all 8. And if my computer crashes or I'm late to a meeting, then I can just right click on that and boom, it'll all load. And I don't have to go load it manually. All right. Now, I've already done this. I'm not going to, which brings us to the next point, which is I recommend preloading this stuff. If you got to, computers all have these moments where they take 25 seconds to load a web page, right? You don't want to be doing that on the call. Preload it. Go load that thing. Let it be loading while you're studying your notes before the call and all that jazz. Okay? I've gotten out of presentation mode. WhatsApp and Slack, we've already talked about. You know what I did actually have a real experience of the day? I saw on someone's computer, hey, honey, I can't wait to get home and give you a kiss. Came across a WhatsApp signal. Probably dope. That's kind of funny, I think. I'd just like to have that to come up in your presentation. Yes?
One of the primary reasons why we have to establish that too on a demo is that I can't count how many times I've been on a call with a prospect and I am like hyper analyzing everything on their desktop to see what their shortcuts are, what competitors they're using. If they, for a second, pull up their email, I'm like, trying to see like, what. So there is a security concern to it as well.
Well, speaking on that, when you're in your browser results, it's visible. And I'm speaking first of all, because they saw my browser, just the browser window up there, they took the key and they started their running against the API on my browser.
Yep.
It just happened by I found out by when my email, like, where is this coming from? In front of this house, it was not. So I kind of watched a little bit back and I shut down. I had no idea who it was.
Yeah, so on that note, you guys might want to reset your keys every once in a while. But because like I'm going to show you guys my key here in just a minute. I can't avoid it in the demo tool, but you're probably going to want to reset your demo key every once in a while. That way someone doesn't steal it and run off with it.
Yeah, so
I'll show you just a minute. So next I'll show you. Next, execute the plan. So you guys form a plan, execute the plan. So we're going to get on a call with Acme Connections. It's with Wile E. Coyote. And it says, and we're going to float right at the Wile E. Coyote attitude. Now, we're going to get on the call, and we have a surprise. His engineer canceled his meeting and decided to show up on our meeting spontaneously. So now you need to speak to 2 levels, 30,000 foot and potentially down to 5,000 foot. Just something to be mindful of. Now, ideally, this happens, and you might be able to say, hey, Ben, hey, Roy, you guys are walking by. Can you jump in on this call? And if we can maybe jump in on the call now that you have an engineer involved. But if not, just bear in mind, some of your language needs to tailor to that engineer, okay? And so I would begin by presenting the key features because Roy told me to. I'm joking. No, it's a good thing to say. Here's the key features, but I would maybe begin here. I would talk about I would then go to the site and begin presenting. So let's go there, and I would say, all right, here's the features, the application, here's where we gather data. You guys are far better salespeople than me, and you can talk about all that. You begin with the main site, talk about the simple setup and the quick integration. We just copy-paste code from our site. We have tons of code snippets where your engineers can just get started and start running with the API. Literally, if they have a compiler installed, they can be running against our API in less than 15 minutes. Big if they have a compiler installed and set up, but it is typically true. We're battle tested, yada, 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 and then we move through the 30,000 foot level, and then we move into this section, all right? Here are our 5 code libraries where you can pick the different libraries that we support. We offer you the code snippets here to enable you to copy paste and begin testing in minutes. We have what's called inferred data. The inferred data is like gender, location, ethnicity, workplace that we infer when we don't have the data. We infer it by comparing other data points in our custom algorithms. Here are our data types: name, email, phone number, usernames, images, age, gender, address, career, education, associates, language. These are the data, the groups of which are data. We have tons of data hanging off all of these, all based on the key that you're dealing with at the time: contact, social, and business. Yep.
Hey, this is a good thing. If you want to show all the data points without having price, you can go there instead of price.
Yep. So like associates is not available on this contact key, but it is available on the other two keys. We also then have our data sources listed here. We have, first of all, our data source categories. We collect all sorts of data from personal profiles down to web pages. And again, like if you know your customer, you can focus on certain things, right? I'm not going to read these to you. You guys are very well familiar with them, but I'm just using how the website can begin your demo. Thumbnails, you can decide whether or not that's important for your particular scenario. Now, and then I would typically just mention, here's the reference. But unless if the developer is on the call with me, if he or she wants to say, hey, what about blah, 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 I would then try to answer it in the reference. But I would try to move on. This is just showing them that this is here as a resource to help them do their job. Because I want to get as quickly as possible to the demo tool, okay? Because this is going to show really the nuts and bolts of how the API works. Now, I didn't memorize. The first one I'm going to do is Clark Kent, I think. So what I did is I pasted down here, because I would normally have these written down somewhere to where I'd be handy, because I don't want to be switching back and forth normally in a presentation. But I'm going to start here with Clark Kent. I want to get out of full screen mode. 1 second, please. So we plug in here to Clark Kent at example.com, if I can type. Can I type today? I'm not signed in. That's funny. Apparently, I didn't check this when I signed into this computer earlier.
Remember what I said about live demos?
Yeah, thank you very much. My job was to do live demos today. Yeah, I know, that's what I was going to do, the copy paste, but I thought I would try it. All right. So it says here API request sent. Here's my key. So right here, you talked about, is the key visible? Yeah, it's visible right there. If they're smart enough to catch it, they're going to catch the key right there, because the demo tool gives you the exact URL you would use if you were doing a post in the tool. But here you can jump right into the JSON response where it shows the different types. This is a status code of 200, which means it was successful. We have 3 sources for the Clark Kent. One person would respond. One person was returned. And then we have the query that it actually turned it into. This enables your developers to check whether or not the query that was sent is what you expected it to be when it got back. This is how we interpreted your query. And we go into this again, whether you're going to 5,000 or 30 foot, or 5,000 or 30,000 feet, depends on who you're talking to. But since there's an engineer on the call, I would talk then about, all right, here's all the available data. We talked about this earlier, all the summary. This is in the very top of the JSON response. You can evaluate what's in the profile. And then now it says right here, this is a person. This means you're getting back a full person profile, all right, as opposed to a possible person's profile. And then again, you cover whatever data that is relevant to your particular call. If you go, you can search in this window. So if you want to say, you know what, I want to go look at Facebook profiles. Here it lists the usernames with under Facebook, so that's relevant to this particular customer. Maybe you want to talk about sources. You can zoom down and quickly go to sources. And there's 2 of them here, so we want to go up. Where are the show sources is off? In the demo key, you have to do it in the thing. So if you want to see this, So if you want to see the sources, you have to copy paste this URL into a new window. And then you add to the end of this, show, yeah, I know I had a typo, thank you, equals true. And now this is an unformatted version. If you use Firefox, which we'll cover in the library or in the API University, we'll get this formatted, but this is a raw version, and you can do the same thing here and search for sources. And here at the bottom of the response is the list of where we got all the information, from what sources and from what. And Nate does a great job of pitching this in his presentation when he senses that a user wants to see it. Yes. So if you have a possible person's response, it will map an ID and you can link the source and how it was built. And if you say show sources equals all, it'll show you the sources that were rejected in the clustering process. So you can gather a great deal of information that is valuable to certain clients with show sources. And what's really cool about the demo tool right here is no matter what kind of search you do, so say we're not going to do Clark Kent, we're going to search for, poor Garth. He loves it. So we did the search, and here it is. We have 26 people, 26 profiles associated with just Garth Moulton, okay? So when you scroll down a little bit further, this says, hey, here's all the available data if you're searching with a premium key, and here is a possible person's. This means it was a possible person's response with 26 people being returned, and you can step through the profile the same way. Now, I don't have time, guys, at this conversation to go jump through the details of all these different headers, but I'm trying to give you a start to be able to go parse this out and be able to explain it to your folks. One more thing, and then before I answer that question, if you want to then go back to a browser and say, hey, I want to search in a browser and modify my match criteria, you just copy this request URL, put it in a browser, Control A, Control V, hit return, and now it's loading in a browser just like it did in the demo tool. Now your key is hidden from folks. If you want to, you could just as easily not use the demo tool, other than if you want to illustrate to them how to use it, because it is helpful for them to be able to go play with it later. But if you didn't want to use the demo tool for whatever reason, you could go build your queries in the demo tool, copy them to a browser, and then just purely use a browser like this for your showing how the JSON works. Now you can go on the end of this thing and hit end and say, hey, I want to modify what this says. Let's go show underscore sources equals all. Now notice how we went from 29 available sources, and visible sources was somewhere way lower. I think it was like 80s or something like that. Now it's showing everything. So this means everything that was used to build the profile and everything that wasn't, that was rejected to build this profile, is being shown here. Sorry? Okay, related. Thanks, Roy. Let's go back to the presentation, the time we have, and catch up where we are. Any questions? Sorry, you had a question.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to know what the rationale is not using the browser to demo and then being able to access with it or Chrome or
Yeah. The rationale is I don't have enough time to go into how to use all the different features of Firefox. And what's cool about this is it will build the query for you. So if you say, hey, I want to go search by a Brazilian user, is a CP ID, you just plug it in there and it'll search for it. You don't have to know the syntax. You can plug in, like right now, if you want to give me a phone number, I can search for it right here. And you don't have to know the syntax. If you're less comfortable with the syntax inside the browser, this tool was developed for just that reason. And it's kind of funny that people don't want to use this user-friendly way of building these things, because this is really cool, because you can go down here and say, all right, this has built the search for me. It gave me the syntax. Yes, my key is exposed, but that's easily solved, right? Every once in a while, I email my key, and I just go in, disable it, create a new one, and now I'm off and running with a new key. It happens. But the other really cool thing is here about the search pointer. See this right here? The search pointer is a bookmark, right? Search pointer is a bookmark. So if you have a person list here, and if this were a possible persons list with 25 profiles, if you found one you wanted to dig deeper and get a full person response on, you just click on the search pointer here and it will automatically load a search pointer search. You cannot do that in a browser. You can only do that from the demo tool because it has to be a post. The search pointer is typically way too long. The maximum characters that can go across an HTTP is 8,000, and search pointer is typically longer than 8,000 characters. So you have to do that here. Every once in a while you get lucky and there'll be a short one and you'll be able to do it in the browser. But here's your request URL. See how long it is? It's huge because it's an encrypted version of the data, and then you get down here and see a blown up version of that full profile. Let's see what I have left in the presentation, and then we'll get to more questions. We did the demo tool. Like in this case, I said I could have used Daniel Hott in presenting possible persons, but I think it's very important to explain the difference between person and possible person, and then of course no match. Because as the especially if you have someone semi-technical on the call or more technical. So obviously you wrap up, you guys know how to do this far better than me. We talk about signing up, getting a demo account, getting your keys, and obviously you would go back to here and like this says show me my keys because I'm logged in. If I want to show the user what it's like, you go to a private browser window just like this, type in API, people.com/API, and now it'll show how they look at it, which now it says start for free, and they click on this and you can show them what the sign up looks like, right? Just by going to a secret browser window. Just bear in mind that if you're only showing one window, they won't see this unless you switch windows. You can step through how to do the wrap up, remind them that, hey, your developers can look at how to get started on this page. They can move over to the reference here, and they can see all the different tags. This navigation expands for each one. The response is not one line long. It's got 4 sections underneath here. We go all the way down to data fields. There's a reference for each individual data field. If you are a nerd, this is huge. You do not want to program an API that does not have a section like this. Just saying. I want it to be in 1 year, like 500% of this, actually. And now if you get lost, this is huge, guys. If you get lost and your browser closes, you have to reboot your computer and you get started, or maybe you're at a coffee shop on someone else's computer and you get into an impromptu presentation. If you know people.com and your email and password for signing up at people.com, which most people are just using Google. So if you know your Google email and password, and you can sign in with that, you can go to any browser in the world, go to this people.com/API, sign in, and once you're signed in, you can then, as I try to click off of this, hello. You can go and get all of your links from here. So if you go to people.com/API, you can go down here and click on show me my keys, or I'm sorry, click on API. My bad. Click on the menu and go to, where is the resource? I just did this earlier. This is a funny layout. Developers. My bad. So you go to developers to load this page right here. And you can load all 4 pages right from this page. You can right click on this and say open a new window and load the demo. And then from the get started page, you can right click on it and say load reference. And now you have the same 4 pages I showed you before you can do from a coffee shop, right? But I highly recommend when you're working in the office, make a folder like this where you can load automatically. Hey, it's after 3 o'clock and your bodies are saying, I want to go home. So let's get on to the next thing. Well, we didn't cover tons of examples, header data, variance on search criteria, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Come to the API University and we can really dig into some of this. I know this has been really rushed. That's a shameless plug, all right? Shameless. Firefox, how to use Firefox in the sorted tool. We're going to cover all that. Tons more searches, more JSON responses, how to kind of use the complexity and stir people's imagination. References. I built you a doc. If you open this presentation on the sales kickoff folder, you can go to this folder, and that is a 4-page Word or Google doc with listing the entire sample use case for Coyote Enterprises or whatever it's called, and all the different resources, including a sample page on how to what data to use for your search APIs for multiple persons, Brazilian IDs, et cetera, et cetera. Again, come the API, we'll cover that. Review. Pick your tools based on your use case. You guys know that. We're all salespeople. Store links in your browser. Have a folder for it. That way you can instantly generate. Hey guys, can I say, can we kind of maybe think about having a company policy where we end our meetings at 45 minutes after? I know customer success is, we're constantly running from meeting to meeting, and we do not have time to prep for the next meeting, answer a couple of emails before we run into the next meeting. Half the meetings go late anyway, so just throwing it out there. Maybe we should end our meetings 45 minutes after it. Huh? What's that? Okay, that's fair. Just throwing it out there. Memorize people.com/API. You can get to every one of these links from there. Resources. I gave you the Word doc already, not at the end of the presentation. And get Nate on calls. Nate is way better than me at presenting the API. Maybe I have more tech stuff, but Nate's amazing. He does a great job. And this is another shameless plug for the Dance of the API demo. And here was the goal: how to successfully demonstrate the API. Did we succeed? 30 minutes? Cool. All right. Where are the drinks?